if you take a look at what the U.S. is doing, and this goes for Europe too, they're kind of standing off. They claim that they can't intervene because of the Russian veto. That has no credibility. If they wanted to intervene, they wouldn't care what the Security Council says. I mean, evidence about that's just overwhelming. But I think they're probably internally quite happy about the Russian veto because it gives a pretext for not doing anything. So what they're doing is giving some support to the rebels, the rebel forces. They're obviously giving some arms and other support to them, but not enough to make much of a difference. And I think the reason is they don't particularly like Assad, but they're even more worried about what might follow. I mean, the fact that he's a brutal dictator, that doesn't get in anyone's way. We've supported much more brutal dictators than that quite happily in the past. So you put the rhetoric aside and take a look at the historical record and the circumstances in Syria, and you can see that there's that kind of a dilemma. Assad is not our favorite person, but he's been pretty much playing the Western game. Not perfectly, but pretty well, and whatever follows might be worse. Actually, it was the same with Gaddafi. The U.S. and Britain were supporting Gaddafi pretty strongly, almost up till the day of the Arab Spring. Sometimes it was comical. You recall the LSE scandal. That was one example. There was another one right here, down the street at Harvard. The business school has a group called, I think, the Monitor Group, which offers advice and aid to other countries. One of their main clients was Gaddafi. They were organizing, they're apparently the ones who wrote the thesis for Gaddafi's son, who got a degree at LSE. Apparently they took care of that. But they were also bringing leading American intellectuals to Libya to meet with the great thinker in his tent and discuss the Green Book and so on. And there is a report by a London Times reporter, which I haven't seen anyone investigate, but I think it's at least credible, that during the, right before the, shortly before the bombing of Libya, the International Tribunal dealing with Charles Taylor in Liberia, the prosecution arrested its case. But according to this report, and had interviews with the prosecutors, one of them an American law professor, one a British barrister, they said they were quite unhappy to rest the case because what they wanted to do was to indict Gaddafi, since he was responsible for arming and training the forces that carried out the atrocities. But they said they couldn't do it because Britain and the United States threatened to defund the tribunal if they did. And when the American law professor was asked why, he said, "Welcome to the world of oil." That's the answer. That was right before the bombing. But he wasn't, again, not the favorite person for the U.S. and Britain. He was more or less cooperative, but he's kind of mercurial, doing all kinds of things they didn't like. For example, he had been the main funder of the African National Congress at a time when the United States was supporting the apartheid regime and, in fact, condemning Mandela's African National Congress as one of the more notorious terrorist groups in the world. So they didn't want Gaddafi funding it. And there are other things that they didn't like. So when an opportunity came to maybe get something better, the imperial triumvirate took the opportunity. You can debate whether it was the right thing to do or not, but it was pretty isolated in the world, and there were alternatives that could have at least been explored. But it's the same. There's nothing new about it. I mean, that's the history of imperialism as far back as you want to go.